Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Guys, welcome back to r/malicious compliance, where you'll hear juicy, satisfying stories about people getting exactly what they ask for. And guys, in this episode, a new Karen neighbor moves into a neighborhood and starts bossing people around, and it doesn't go well for her. I hope you guys enjoyed today's lineup of stories. Hit subscribe if you haven't, and hey, you can always send or link your stories to this email right here. Okay, so I just read one of these that was short and sweet, and it reminded me of my own experience. So on this day, I was out getting lunch with some colleagues. We had finished, and I was backing out of my parking spot into the road with the other two gentlemen in the car with me. We were all professionals, all in suits, all clean-cut adults. Clearly not folks trying to pull anything. We were just leaving lunch. So as I back out, I feel a thud. A young college student had backed into the side of my vehicle. Now I say side to establish an important fact, that I was already in the middle of the road. The student was backing out of a spot across the street. When they struck me, I was already in the road and the collision was their fault. So I get out and it's no big deal to me. I tell them I'm fine swapping insurance and I'll file it and get it taken care of. The student refuses and demands to get the police involved, and they've already called their parents though. Apparently, when explaining a few things to Dad, they told a few half-truths to insinuate that it was actually my fault. So good old Dad on the phone agreed with getting police involved to get a report and to try to keep me from skating off. I'm thinking, fine by me. Cue the malicious compliance. So they call the cops and eventually they arrive. Before I moved my vehicle, I took photos of the scene from every angle and did a video walk around. The cop opens his door and the college student beelines it for him, talking 90 miles a minute, complete with wild hand movements, trying to model what had happened as they walked. Now, I don't hear what the college student says, but I do hear the cop say, "Yeah, what you're saying clearly didn't happen here, kiddo." The cop got all the insurance information exchanged. He then talked to me and my two colleagues, who presented consistent stories that matched the clear dent in my vehicle. He then went over with a ticket pad to the college kid. The cop told me that I could get out of here, and he told me to have a nice day. All the while, the kid was trying to talk himself out of a ticket. Their insurance paid to fix everything, and I tried to save him a ticket. Yeah, guys, I know when you get into a collision with someone that it's a super anxiety and stress-filled situation, but the last thing you want to do is to start lying, especially if it's clearly your fault, and I hope the kid learned an important life lesson that day. And while we're on the topic of people calling police and having it backfire on them, here's another one for you. So this took place around 3 a.m. in the morning, and my entire family was asleep, after a long ride back to our hometown. I was having one of the most pleasant dreams that involved having expensive cakes and fine wine, and it was rudely disrupted by the sound of my family's car alarm, and my father went out to check out what happened. Apparently our neighbor was drunk, and he had fallen somehow. The guy hit our car hard enough for the alarm to activate. Now, this entire issue could have been solved with a simple apology, and everyone could have gone back to their own lives, but if that happened, I wouldn't be telling you this story. Our neighbor was known to be a rather proud person, and he had loudly declared a few times that no one had ever won an argument against him in the past. So it wasn't surprising when he decided to push the blame onto my father when he realized that everyone in my house was watching him. My father tried to talk things out and asked if he needed any help, but the possibility of a peaceful discussion was going down pretty quickly when we saw that our neighbor's face was about as agitated as a fish out of water. None of us knew what was going on because, as far as we knew, our car was parked in front of our house, and there was nothing wrong with that. It also didn't help that our neighbor looked like a centipede that lost 98 legs. The guy could barely stand properly without using our car as support. Their conversation goes something like this. My father asked, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help?" And that's when my neighbor screams, "Your car! I fell because of your stupid car." My father says, I'm sorry that happened." To which my neighbor screams, "Move your car or I'm calling the police." My father tells him, "Go ahead, my car's in the right place, it's not doing anything wrong." So guess what? The neighbor gets out his phone and calls the police to come. So while we're waiting for police to arrive, he continued his loud outburst, and he had woken up nearly everyone in the vicinity of our small neighborhood. Our lovely neighbor was loudly exclaiming how he was in the right, and how my dad didn't know the rules here because he doesn't live here. My father kept his poker face all the way up until police came, and that's when my neighbor granted himself a glamorous show of him being arrested in front of everyone, with a charge of being a public nuisance for causing damage to someone's property with mischief, as well as drunk driving later on, when the police found out that there was no way he walked home from a bar that was 30 miles away. Although his fall only caused a small dent on the car's bumper, with slight damage to the paint job which would have easily been fixed, my father got $1,000 in payment for damages. We had a great dinner the next day, which consisted of expensive cakes and fine wine. Well, look at that, guys. Dreams do come true. And I guess that's the first argument the neighbor ever lost. But he could easily defend that by saying he was drunk, right? Alright, so this story is a little long, and it happened where I lived in college. It was a very liberal and progressive city, which is one of the reasons I chose to live there, so this incident really stuck with me. The one neighborhood on the outskirts of the city was a bunch of old, tract homes, with the majority of them being homeowner-occupied. The neighborhood was mostly a Hispanic and Latin population. Well, as home prices skyrocketed, this neighborhood became one of the few affordable places to buy a home in the whole county. My friend and her brother had bought a house while the prices were still decent, and I was renting a room there. We're white, but we do love the culture and we're not trying to change it. It was the kind of place where on Fridays, we would walk down to the neighborhood park, and there would be a bunch of taco trucks set up and we would eat and hang out with the neighbors. Everyone was very welcoming, and we got invited to all kinds of cookouts, events, and the first funeral that I'd ever been to was a huge party with dancing and laughter that truly celebrated the person's life. It's still one of my favorite neighborhoods ever. So one day, we're out front talking to the neighbor across the street, who's super nice and friendly. And suddenly, this older white woman quickly waddles up to us and she just starts talking. The woman doesn't even introduce herself, but I think we all know that she's a Karen. So Karen starts talking to the neighbor in that very exaggerated way. That means she doesn't think he speaks English, so she must speak loudly with big gestures. Now, I do want to note that this is straight up racist based on his looks, because we were speaking English when she rolled up on us. It was at this point Karen tells him, not asks him, but tells him that it's time for him to paint his house. At this point, she's doing the over-exaggerated Karate Kid paint the fence gesture. And she's saying, paint. You know, paint the house. Now, hearing that, we were all stunned into silence and giving each other what the F looks as she keeps going and says, "That light blue is no good," shaking her finger in his face. She repeats, "No good, it's too bright." She then shields her eyes from his house like she was looking into the sun, and she repeats, "Too bright. Do you understand?" Now, I do want to note that there is no HOA or city ordinance limiting the colors of the houses in this neighborhood, but none of the houses had any unusual or unique colors. These were tract homes, with only about 5 different colors when they were built, and most of them were the original color, or something similar. The neighbor's house was still the original color, so this light blue is not unique at all. It's literally one of the most basic colors, and is on a lot of homes that were built during the time. Also, the paint on the house was in pretty good condition. It wasn't peeling or anything. So my roommate, the neighbor, and I all find our voices at about the same time, with my roommate saying, "What the F are you talking about?" And I'm like, "Who are you?" And the neighbor was going off in a tirade of very loud and fast Spanish, but Karen is undaunted in her quest. She realizes that my roommate and I speak English, and she starts telling us how she just moved in and she's just trying to protect her home's value, and that it's obviously time for him to paint the house, and she wants the neighborhood to have a certain color palette, with more neutral tones, instead of this carnival thing that was going on right now. And yes, she pronounced it like the celebration in Rio, but over-exaggerated. My roommate and I kept interrupting her and telling her that nobody cares what she wants. The paint looks fine, and she has no right to tell him what color he can paint his house, and if she doesn't like it, she can move, because she shouldn't have moved here in the first place with that attitude. The Karen was telling us how she's already asked a few neighbors and they had agreed with her, which was highly unlikely. Suddenly, the neighbor waves his hands in front of our faces while saying, "No, no, 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 no," and then points to himself, and that's when we realized that the neighbor's acting like he doesn't speak English. And since roommate and I know he speaks perfect English, at this point we're just trying to contain our laughter, waiting to see what he's gonna do. Well, he starts speaking to Karen in Spanish, the same slow, loud way that she was talking to him in English, complete with the big gestures and everything. Now, I don't know Spanish very well, but from what I can understand, he's telling her the colors of the houses in the neighborhood, and how her house is blue, and his house is also blue, so what's her problem? Karen clearly doesn't understand, and she's getting more and more upset, but she looks at us for help, and we tell her that we don't understand what he's saying either. At this point, Karen's fuming, and we're trying and failing to contain our laughter. This goes on for a couple of minutes before the neighbor's 10-year-old son comes out on their porch and loudly asks him if they're going to grandma's for dinner, in perfect English. The neighbor then turns to his son and says that they're leaving as soon as mom gets back from the store, also in perfect English. He then turns to Karen, speaking to her in Spanish again, and although I don't know exactly what he said, there was definitely some swearing and at least one not nice name to call a woman. He then says to us in perfect English, "See you Friday for dinner," and then he walks away. It takes Karen a few seconds to realize what's going on, and then her face turns bright red, and she's just sputtering, unable to put together a complete sentence. We just walked away still laughing. Now here's the malicious compliance part. So a couple of weeks later, I'm out of town for a couple of days, and I get back very late at night. As I'm getting my bags out of the car, I realize that it's very bright out, and something's just not right. That's when I start looking around, thinking that one of the neighbors must have put in some walkway lighting or maybe even a floodlight over the garage. And that's when I see it. The neighbor across the street had done what Karen had wanted and painted his house a beautiful bright orange. And I mean, this thing was practically neon. Under the light of the full moon, the house actually looked like it glowed in the dark. And that's why it was especially bright out in the middle of the night. I laughed so hard that I was in tears. The next day, seeing it in the daylight, the color was actually more of a peach than a neon, but it did look nice. But for whatever reason, it was glowing dark orange at night. It surprised no one that Karen turned her home into a rental and moved somewhere else after that. And that, my friends, is how you win against an entitled racist neighbor. Guys, I always love reading stories about new people moving into a neighborhood and acting like they own the damn place and start bossing people around, only to have it not go the way they want. And this person comments, "I'm a paint retailer here, so years back I had a couple of customers come in and ask for 20 gallons of the most god-awful yellow-green you have. They didn't care about the finish or brand, as long as it was exterior paint and ugly. So I got to talking with them while I mixed it up, and I found out that they'd been feuding with their neighbors for years, and just saw a for sale sign in the yard that morning. Their plan was one last FU, in the shape of a fresh coat of ugly-ass paint, to drive down their neighbor's property value. Guys, some people are just so darn petty, and I freaking love it. So here's some quick info. I live in a small gated community of about 30 to 40 houses. However, unlike most gated communities, the sidewalks leading to the community from the outside is not gated, meaning anyone can come in. Now, I say this because my dad has a really bad habit of leaving the doors unlocked. All of them. The front door and the two back sliding doors. Dad does this because he primarily works from home, and he likes to go into the backyard to smoke, so locking the doors all the time is tedious for him. Dad leaves the house every now and then to replenish his cigarette supply or to get lunch, and he always leaves the doors unlocked. This has triggered my anxiety, as around the time we moved in, there had been a robbery at one of our neighbors' houses because they left their back door open for their dog. They then left the house real quick to pick up a child from school. They had been gone for 10 minutes, and when they returned, the mom's jewelry box, expensive watch, and some other things had been stolen. So obviously, I wanted the doors to be locked, especially when no one was at home. Even for a moment. One day, I had gone out with a friend for the entire day, and I'd reminded my parents that I would be back pretty late. We left the house at around 11 a.m., and he dropped me off at 9 p.m. When I got out of the car, I realized that my mom's car was there, but not my dad's. They only take my dad's car when they're going out for a while. Now, I did get a bit nervous, but I trusted that my mom would have at least checked the doors to make sure they were locked before they left, but no. I get to the front door and it wasn't locked. I go inside and guess what? Neither of the back doors were locked as well. And that's when I got mad, and I mean mad. I texted my mom immediately, asking them how long they've been out and how long they were planning on staying out, and she texted back the times and steam started blowing out of my ears. They had been gone since 2 p.m. and they were likely not going to come back until near midnight. The house could have been completely stripped of all of our belongings in that amount of time. I then call her and start shouting that I had just gotten home and all the doors were unlocked. My mom panics in response, and she asked if anything's out of place. After a quick run through of the house, I deduced that nothing seemed to have been taken, so no one must have noticed. My mom then sighs in relief and says that she told my dad to lock the doors before they left, and she would talk with him about it right now. When they get back, my dad is angry at me. He starts yelling at me saying, "This is my house, I do what I want, yada yada yada." When I protest that we could have been robbed, he decides to show off just how big his ego is, and he says, "Honey, look at me. No one would dare to rob the house when I'm living in it. Everyone in this damn neighborhood is scared of me." Now that's when I stood there staring at him and my jaw drops. Dad puts on the, "Ha, I've won" smirk, and then he says, "No one is brave enough to rob this house. Relax." So I did relax. For the next couple of weeks, I make sure to go out of the house as much as possible, usually to my previously mentioned friend's place. And I'd always take my valuables with me. My laptop, my 3DS, all of its games, my Nintendo Switch, and the expensive jewelry I own. The reason for this is because my parents like going out together when I'm not home. I had told my friend about what's going on, so they suggested leaving my valuables at his house, so I don't have to bring them with me everywhere I go, to which I happily obliged. And then it finally happened one day. As I mentioned before, my dad works from his home. His office is just a large desk with 2 laptops and 2 monitors. It was in the living room near the sliding door. His work was primarily done on a laptop that costed well over $1,000. The other laptop was about $500, which he mostly used for personal stuff. So on this day, I ran out of paper in my journal, so I decided to walk to Walmart, which was about 10 minutes away, to buy a new one. My mom was at work, and Dad was likely out getting lunch, so I left the empty house carelessly, leaving the doors unlocked. Now I took my sweet time walking to that Walmart. The usual 20 to 30 minute walk to and from there was taking about an hour and 15 minutes. When I got to the final crosswalk to go across the street to my community, that's when my phone rang. It was Dad. Dad was in a panic, saying he couldn't find his laptops and they weren't on his desk or in his bags or anywhere else he could have left them. He then asked me if I had seen them. I tell him, I saw them on your desk before I left. Are you sure they're not there? After a long pause, he asked me where I am, and I told him I was walking back from Walmart. Dad didn't know that I had taken the scenic route back home, so he thought that in the span of 20 or so minutes, someone had come into the house, unplugged both of his laptops, and took them, the chargers, and his spare cash in one of the drawers. When I got home, he had gone to our neighbors' houses, asking them if they'd seen anyone go into the house, and all but one said no. The one neighbor told him that they had seen a man enter the house through the sliding door, but she thought it was my dad, since she had frequently seen him leaving the house through the back doors when he goes out, especially during the past few weeks. My dad had looked like half of his soul had been sucked out of his body by Satan himself when he found this out. And then he comes back, and it was a lot of fun watching him explain to my mom why his laptops, spare cash, and my mom's iPad were missing. That's when some calls to police were made, and the neighbor described what the man was wearing to the police, and after the police questioned some other neighbors that lived close to the gate, they said they clearly saw a man with clothes described walking out of the community with a large bag. After about 2 weeks of searching, the police found the man and he was arrested. The laptops and my mom's iPad were returned, but my dad's personal laptop had been factory reset. Also, the iPad's screen was cracked and the money was gone. The doors stayed locked after that. Oh my goodness, guys. Maybe Dad wasn't as intimidating as he thought. And guys, I don't know how common it is for people to not lock their doors where they live, but I always lock my doors, and let me tell you why. So where I used to live, in my parents' house, we had a side door and a front door. The front door was always locked, guys, but the side door, like, you had to open the gate to our fence to get to the side door, so I always had a bad habit of leaving that one unlocked. And one day, when I was sitting in my room, in the house by myself, some random woman just opens the door to my bedroom, asking me for a freaking lighter and $3 for the bus. And seriously, I was screaming at her, asking her if she was out of her mind, just walking into random people's houses like this. And the woman literally says to me, "Oh, I do it all the time." Guys, she walked into people's houses all the time. Like, she's lucky I wasn't frickin' Ted Bundy. So yeah guys, always keep your doors locked. And with that said, let me ask you guys this. How many of you have a habit of not locking your doors? Please answer the question because I would love to know how many people don't lock their doors. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /malicious_compliance. Guys, if you enjoyed the stories today, hit that like button. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, I'll link it right here. A Karen invades OP's house, and then she has the audacity to call 911. Because she catches OP naked. It's such a funny story, so go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.